spent his career in the scientific community, I get so tired of people who mean well say you can't prove the Bible, but, and then they'll make some positive statement. I'm so tired of hearing that preamble, this presumption that you can't prove the Bible. Yes, you can. This document, this collection of documents you have in your lap, the Bible, is incredible, and you can demonstrate that it is messages in the Bible. And there's a lot of nonsense published in that area, but yes, there are. In fact, Solomon tells us it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, and the duty and honor of kings to search out a matter. So we're going to explore some of those things this morning. And I believe that before we're through, you'll have some examples that will strengthen your confidence that that Bible, the Word of God, that we also depend on, is in fact a supernatural document, a unique document. But I'll start by asking you a riddle, and that is, who is the oldest man in the Bible? Anyone? Methuselah. Good for you. Yes, Methuselah lived 969 years. He's the oldest, the longest life in the Bible. And yet he died before his father. Yeah, that puzzles you a little bit, doesn't it? He's the oldest man in the Bible, yet he died before his father. See, I cheated on you. You see, everybody forgets who his father was. His father was a guy by the name of Enoch. And Enoch was an interesting guy. And we'll talk a little bit about him. At the age of 65, something happened in his life that from that point on, he walked with Noah did not come as a surprise. The flood of Noah was preached on for 4 generations, surprisingly enough. But when Enoch's son was born, God told him that as long as his son is alive, the judgment of that flood would be held back. And indeed, so he names his son Methuselah. That's a Hebrew word from 2 root words. The word muth, which means his death, that occurs 125 times in the Old Testament. And the verb shalach, which means his death it means to bring or send forth. The combination means his death shall bring or send forth. Strange title, but that's his name. And we discover when we study Genesis chapter 5 carefully that Methuselah was 187 when he had a son by the name of Lamech, and Lamech was 182 when he had a son by the name of Noah. And it was in the 600th year of Noah that the flood came. And in other words, the year that Methuselah died is the year the flood came. And that was the prophecy. Can you girls imagine what it was like to raise that kid? Every time he caught a cold, the entire neighborhood would go into panic, right? As long as he's alive, everything's right. When he dies, that's when the Lord did come. The flood did come. When the flood did come. Before I go further, I want to give you a little flavor for the Hebrew language because it's very different. Most alphabets are phonetic. They help us to pronounce the words. The Hebrew letters, the 22 of them in their alphabet, carry meaning, not just sound. The first letter in their alphabet, and even the word alphabet is Hebrew, by the way, the alphabet, the aleph, it was originally written like an ox's head, showing on the left up there. And we are up there, aren't they? Okay, good. Being the first letter, it means first, or strength, or leader. That's what the flavor of that letter is. And the second letter is Beth. It was originally written like a little house or tent. And the word Beth means house. And Bethlehem is the house. And breathe. We all remember Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. And Hartford, Hereford, hurricanes hardly ever happen. You get Elijah Doolittle to get her H's right. Same idea there. Well, if you take the hey and put it in the middle of a word, the collective represents the essence of that. The word Ab was father. If you put the hey in the middle of it, you get Ahab, which reveals the heart or essence of the father. That is the Hebrew word for love. Because love is the essence of the Father. See, the point I'm trying to get across, the meaning is in the letters, not just the sound. And so, now, you may recall in Genesis 17, both Abram and Sarai had their names changed, right? What God did is simply put a hey in the middle of their names. A breath. He filled them with the Spirit. The Spirit was infused in their lives. Abraham, Sarah. The hey was what connoted that, if you will. Well, as we read our Bible, we really get enchanted with, of course, the first 2 chapters is the creation. That's pretty exciting stuff. You get to chapter 3, that's the seed plot of the whole Bible, is rooted in chapter 3. Chapter 4 is the murder of Abel by Cain, and you know that story. From chapter 6 on, we have the flood of Noah, and there's a lot of action there. So the book of Genesis is a very exciting, action-filled book. But when you get to Genesis chapter 5, it's one of those chapters you'd like to skip. It's just a genealogy. And if you're in a reading plan, you'd like to sort of skip over that, get into the interesting stuff. No, Genesis 5. What is it all about? Well, it's a genealogy of 10 people. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. See, the problem with that list, it's not translated for you. That is transliterated. Those are approximations of how they were pronounced. I wonder what might lie behind these other names. Let's see if we can go through this a little bit. That name Adam is pretty straightforward. That comes from Adamah, which means man. No problem with that one. He's followed by a son by the name of Seth. The word Seth means appointed. And how do we know that? Because Eve tells us that in the previous chapter. Eve said when he was born, "For God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." And you all know about Cain and Abel. Everybody asks me, where did Cain get his wife, right? He married his brother's sister because he was able. Thought I'd help you with that, right? All right, we'll move on. He has a son by the name of Enosh. Now, this is a heavy name to go around with. The word Enosh means mortal, frail, or miserable. Can you imagine having him on a sports team? Hey, miserable, you're on our team. You know, it doesn't really work, especially in school, I imagine. Okay, and it comes from the root, anash, which means incurable. It's usually used of a wound or grief or woe or sickness, something like that. Kenan now, not Canaan, Kenan can mean sorrow, dirge, or elegy. Don't confuse it with Canaan. Balaam in Numbers 24 develops a pun on his name. It's another whole story. But Kenan means sorrow. These are pretty heavy names, miserable and so forth. So when Kenan has a son, he decides enough's enough. So he names his son, when he's born, a mouthful but a wonderful name, Mahalalel. And Mahal, which means blessed or praised one, and El, the name for God. Mahalalel, kind of hard to pronounce, but what a great name, quite a contrast to his elders. The blessed God is what his name means. He names his son Yared, and there's a story behind that I'll spare you here, but the name Yarad, which simply means shall come down. And that may have a connection with Genesis 6, but that's a whole another story. That brings us to Enoch. We've mentioned already, but what does the word Enoch mean? It turns out that Enoch